Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today we are very excited to welcome Jacki Smith to the show. She's the founder of Coventry Creations and co-owner of Candle Wick Shop in Ferndale, Michigan. She's also a teacher and author of the best-selling book, Coventry Magic. But today we're going to be specifically talking about, at least some of the show, the archetype of the witch, and wherever the conversation goes around witchcraft and magic. Before we get started, though, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for tuning in again. We have some great shows coming up. First of all, we're just so much looking forward to Jacki today. It's going to be amazing. Next week, we have our good friend Reverend Jim McGrath back, and he'll be doing a show on the miracles of Christ and were they actual miracles and breaking all that down. So should be fascinating, as always, with Jim. We love when he visits. And then we're going to end the month with Lama Kathy Wesley coming back to give us some of her Buddhism wisdom, and I think we can probably all use a little of that right now with everything that's going on in the world. So tune in for that. Get all the information at our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. And you can find out about shows and information on guests and all that kind of stuff. While you're there, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi, and thank you to all of those who have. It's really nice. It helps us to cover some of the cost of producing the show, and that makes us feel good. And as I always say, being a Canadian, I always love it when people buy me a coffee, so please do. And while you're there also, sign up for our mailing list. We have a newsletter that we're going to be putting out in a couple months, and we're going to have some links to some of our favorite episodes, some great content that we find around the web, maybe a lecture from Thich Nhat Hanh or something, things of that nature. So some really cool stuff that's going to be really fun to connect with. And so take a minute and sign up to our list. Don't want to take any more time. So with that, I'm going to kick it back to Krista, and take it away, Krista.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So welcome, Jacki. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be part of the show and meet new friends. I love it.
Great. Yeah, we have this connection to Michigan now. And I don't know what it is, but we've had several there's a couple other people we have on regularly as guests. So it just happened organically.
I love it. Michigan, this is a very magical place. I'm just going to tell you. We got some good stuff here.
It seems like that. I think it's really cool, and it surprised me that way. So I'm very happy to have you. So let's get started with a little bit about how you first got interested in magic and witchcraft. What was your journey towards it?
Actually, honestly, my journey towards this started in the Catholic Church. I love the connection to spirit. I love that blissful feeling that you get when you're really connected to the divine and divine energy. And when I was a little girl, I thought to myself, you make that list, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a nun. So the spiritual path was always on that list for me. So as I grew and matured and realized that Catholicism was not doing it for me as a woman, as somebody who really connects to the divine in a way that I want to affect change and I want to heal. There's not a lot of room in that for traditional Christianity or Catholicism. So I started exploring ran across some like metaphysical things, and that was a little too airy-fairy for me. And I shouldn't say airy-fairy, but the metaphysical things were like, I couldn't grab onto it. So then I started getting into magic. I think runes were one of my first things that I stumbled upon at Walden Books. Do you remember Walden Books?
Oh, yes.
Back in the day? That was it. That's what we had. We had Walden Books, and what was the other one?
I
can't think
now.
of it right now. But so if their magical department or anything spiritual, whatever, was like this wide, maybe. And one day there was that first book of runes.
Is that the one by Bloom or?
Yeah. And that blue box.
Yes.
And the blue bag.
Mm-hmm.
That was a gateway for many a many witch. So I got that, and then I said, well, there has to be more. If there's this, there has to be more. And then I went on a search, and so this was over 30 years ago. So there was not a lot. There was random little weirdo stores that maybe had a little pocket, or there was an herbal store that I learned different things from. They had some really cool herb books, until I just started really getting into some of the early days of magic and witchcraft and Wicca. Everyone was talking about Wicca at that time, so I thought that was it. This is it. This is my jam here. A lot of Scott Cunningham, a lot of Paul Barrow. That's what I had access to, and then it was like, oh, I'm home, and then I found Starhawk, so and the spiral dance, and I'm like, oh, this is it. This is my jam, and over the years, it's just evolved into my own personal practice, which is the Coventry magic, what that's about. But I have always loved the term. Once I found Wicca and understood the difference of these different things, and the archetype of the witch is not necessarily what people had talked about. Man, I claimed myself as a witch from day one.
Yeah, and that's the word witch is still very, I guess, provocative is a good word for it, even amongst people practicing magic, and it has a lot of different connotations. So in your mind, when you think about the witch, and you can talk about how you used to think about it and what you think about now, what is the archetype of the witch for you?
Now versus then. So then I thought it was like you had to have some big calling. It was a witch was like, I'm a midwife witch, or I'm an herbal witch, or so it was part of almost like a clergy position. And now my definition of witch is a lot simpler. It's a title that you give yourself, like friend, or I'm going to be a listener or a leader. I'm going to be a witch. And it means that I'm going to affect change in my life. I'm going to use the resources around me to affect an energetic shift to head in a direction that gets me to my goal. And so there's a lot of witchy people out there that never call themselves a witch, but they do affect change. So I love making it fun and playful. I started a couple years ago, I started doing some marketing for my Witches Brew line of candles. And so I created the Witches Union just for fun, the local number 13, don't start none, won't be none, and so I made a whole logo around it for this marketing, and I made little Witches Union cards, and I started handing them out, and it was a big success. Everyone I handed a witch card to, here's your Witches Union card. Everyone I handed one to, they're like, oh, I'm a witch. I go, absolutely. And it's really funny. On the back of the card is that this card entitles you to watch Harry Potter movies without a child present, to know all the lyrics to every Stevie Nicks song.
I love that one.
It's street credit. There's street cred with other witches because they're going to want one too, and to be in charge of your own life because you're the decider. You get to take the authority over your own life. So really, that's how I view witch now. Is this is just a fun, loving thing, an empowered thing to be.
And, I think that's wonderful. I saw that Witches Union I was going to ask you about, so I'm glad you brought it up because it looks really cool. I'll have to get my card.
I'll make sure I'll send you one.
So, no, and there can be kind of an overlap between magician and witch. And there's also what I've noticed, because I've sort of danced in a lot of worlds. It's one of my, I think, talents is that I like to go into different worlds and try and bridge them a little bit. And I kind of discovered this early on in life. And so I started off with the witchcraft world, but I've been around a lot of ceremonial magicians, and I read a lot, and I like Aleister Crowley's deck. And so it seems like there's a little bit of fear from some of the magical side, or there's also sometimes a little bit of snobbery towards the witch. And there does seem to be something different about them. But what would you say is the difference if I want to call myself a magician versus a witch?
Well, so to me, in very simple terms, as a magician is a scientist. You're using a specific formula that's been tried and true, and then you're going to try different variations on that formula. I mean, really, when is the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram ever been changed? It was coming out of my mouth real hard there. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
But a witch, she's, or he, that the witch is the one who's going to look around and going, I've got a spoon, I've got some sage, I've got dirt and a rock. What am I going to make out of? And I need a prosperity spell. What am I going to do? So I was at a conference, and they had a panel on high magic and a panel on low magic. And so I was invited to be on the panel on low magic. And the first thing I said is I'm a little put out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little put out that this is considered low magic. I want a better definition on this, but it's basically folk magic.
Right.
And so you're going to, a magician has a ton of ritual that says, I'm going to put all these things together to create this real specific shift in a grand gesture. Whereas a witch is going to say, I'm going to tweak energy here, I'm going to tweak energy here, I'm going to tweak energy here. And then, and they kind of, a lot of witches work on the fly in a way that, so the moon is waning and you need to bring something into your life, they're going to remove obstacles. So they're just going to figure out, because that witchy energy is more of, I have a need and it needs to be fixed now. A magician says, okay, I know I got to pay my rent, but in 2 months, the planetary alignment is going to be perfect for this prosperity spell. Or they're going to say, I'm going to create a ton of tools for prosperity that I can unleash in the moment that I need it. That's the difference in my thought process.
I love the idea of the magician being a scientist. That is really a good way of looking at it, because they do a lot of literally of formulas and repeating the same, maybe tweaking it, and maybe someone thinks their formula is slightly better than another. One of the things I personally think that's different is, at least in my mind, I was drawn to witchcraft over the magician because of its connection to nature. And I'm such a nature lover. I mean, I just have always been a lover of nature, and had almost gone into become a marine biologist, and still feel this connection. And my understanding when I first got involved, and I still believe this, I think, is that witches are trying to bend and shape with nature. They're not trying to control it.
Yeah.
And the magician's job is to learn to control forces.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure which is better or not, but
maybe it's the difference between like the scientist and the chef, where the chef learns and tastes and falls in love with all of their ingredients. And when they are doing something, when they're making the perfect stew, shall we say, they can taste the stew and say, oh, I need more basil, I need more rosemary, I need more butter. Or the magic ingredient for most chefs, cumin.
I like that too. That's really true too. And you can take the recipe for chili and have many variations on it, so maybe there's a flexibility, it seems. Of course, like all movements, one of my issues that I think I talked to you before about is I was drawn to witchcraft because there was also decentralization of power by the concept of the coven. And I remember thinking, that's brilliant, because after a certain amount of people, there's always problems in groups. And so you have a spin-off group after you get to 13, you have the spin-off. And I love that idea of decentralizing power and authority, though that doesn't seem to be totally true in witchcraft.
I think with each strength you will find your weakness. And one of the weaknesses I think in witchcraft is that there is an instantaneous expert ability that I'm successful in these 4 things, so I am now an expert. Over the years, there's many different folks I've talked to saying, well, I just started my own coven and I'm high priestess. And I'm like, oh, that's great. I mean, what's your path? What have you studied? She goes, well, I started. So last month I bought this book. Like, awesome. So there's an instant expert status that can be stepped into. And that comes from having that decentralization of power. And so that also means that you can have hundreds of different traditions so you just change the rules to suit yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But then that assumes, so here's the thing for me, a witch is not akin to a religion or a group or a path. So Wicca has the different, or witchcraft as a religion. So to me, there's a difference between witchcraft or Wicca and being a witch who is using her craft. So there's really not any structure. It is a tool.
Right.
Magic is a tool rather than as a religion. I went through Wicca and I went through the more of a Gardnerian tradition in the beginning, and I went through 2 levels of initiation, and then I said, I'm out. I'm not down with this, because the group that I was with at the time had very unhealthy practices and a complete lack of boundaries, which can easily happen in an unchecked, hived off situation. There still has to be a central energy of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And if there isn't a powerful and healthy leadership, doesn't matter how you hive off. If your central is not good leadership, it will either devolve into some really unhealthy practices or it'll fall apart.
Sure. Yeah, I think in going back to that point of the weakness of a decentralized power, my view is that without knowing it, some of Wiccan has basically structured itself around Judeo-Christian values. And it's very hard not to, because we live in a Judeo-Christian world, largely in the Western world.
Yeah.
And you have to really work against it consciously and say, wait a minute, isn't this whole hierarchy thing and expert thing really connected to what I'm trying to get away from? And not, right. I believe in leadership. I do believe in people that can teach and have leadership, but they've earned it. They earned it through their hard work, and we respect them because of the things they put out. And they don't have to even say they're an expert, by what they share. And I totally believe in leadership and things like that. But there's a lot of, like you said, I read a book, I'm now a high priestess or high priest, and I'm sure some of it's well-intentioned, but some of it isn't well-intentioned. And right. I like, going back to the idea of the archetype of the witch, it is different from the path of the religion.
Yeah. If I think about some of the archetypical feminine energies of the witch. So she's typically seen as an old woman surrounded by other old women. This past year, I was informed that I am now an elder in my community, and I said, "Shut your lying mouth! I'm too young to be an elder." Oh shit, no, I'm not. But I don't want to be an elder, not because of age, but because of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
But so going back to that archetypical witch, and these groups of women, I have different groups of women in my life that in many ways serve as a coven. They problem solve with me. I'm there to dry their tears. I'm there to celebrate their successes. I'm there for the last minute road trip to go and rescue somebody or an animal. That to me is that coven energy, but they're not necessarily witches.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that camaraderie and you're right, after a certain point, and it wasn't 13, it was really 6 or 7. after that point, it just became too big, and it naturally fractures because there's only so many people that you can really dedicate energy to.
Sure.
My daughter was devastated when she was in high school, saying, I really only have 2 friends. And I said, to be honest with you, babe, I've really only had 2 friends at a time, and I don't have time for anything else.
Right.
It's hard to split your attention into all these different directions. So that's, I totally went off the rails on that one. So the whole archetypical witch and a small group of people and the decentralized power structure, I think, is kind of a natural way that we do, and we support each other and we protect each other. Because even in a larger structure, you're going to have your smaller cliques and your smaller groups. That is your comfort zone.
Sure. So some of the other, I'm amazed I got involved in witchcraft, because I used to have a nightmare about someone that was like a hag, I would say, in my youth. I'm a big dreamer. I've had a lot of nightmares through my years and different variations. And there was this kind of hag figure when I was really little that used to terrify me. But the way I came across witchcraft was through history. I don't even know why I did this, but I was taking a course on religion at Duke, and we got to pick a project. And I somehow, and we had a partner, and my partner was this redheaded Irish girl, forget her name, and we decided to do a project on the European witch hunts. And to this day, I don't even remember where I got the idea or she got the idea. And it was a really powerful project because it opened my mind up to the whole history of just the witch hunts. But even then, I didn't really get so much involved in it. And I personally think the archetype is still unfolding, and I think it's has that archetype that's connected to power and women, and men embracing the witch would also have a different connection to power, not the male power, but the feminine power, because there's certainly male witches and very wonderful male witches. So I think that's still unfolding. And it's still in some countries very dangerous to be a witch.
And in some countries, it has a completely different connotation. So if you look at in Africa, and there's still the witch hunts in Africa, and it's very scary to look at. Yet that they're using that term as people who are doing evil against each other. And so in talking to somebody who's from Africa, and actually talking to somebody who is from Brazil, and the negative connotation of the witch, the brujeira versus the curandissimo, which I'm butchering those terms. I'm so sorry. I apologize to every Spanish-speaking person right now. So talking to my nephew who's from Brazil, and like that term witch, I mean, that's somebody who's doing evil or trying to do pull power from you. That's when I asked him, what does doing evil mean? It's like they're pulling power from people to their own end, and with no regard for what happens to that person. And so it's just really interesting how that is still a different term. So yes, there's healers and people who are doing healing or supportive work, but then there's also the ones that are not, and that's still considered witch. I want to go into the dreaming about a hag. I dreamt about a hag quite a bit when I was a little girl.
Oh, I'm not alone.
But she was Lady Elaine from Mr. Rogers' Land of Make-Believe.
Oh my goodness.
And Lady Elaine, watching that now as an adult, when my daughter was little and I was watching that, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize Lady Elaine was the witch. She was considered a witch, and they called her the witch. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. That, my mother said I also, as a girl, we lived somewhere when I was young where there was a witch on the street, and she said we would go there for Halloween. I do not remember that. Thank God for parents and their memories, when you're little. And I was like, yeah. Really? And but I would actually argue that the witch archetype includes the dark side of hurting and harming. And at least from my point of view, it doesn't mean that it's kind of like magic. A magician can do good or ill with magic. And it's part of the archetype because, and especially today's modern younger witches, they're very open about, if you harm me, I'm going to do something about it. I've seen it on, mostly on Instagram, and really that in your face, don't mess with me, and being very comfortable with it. It's not, it's part of who I am, and I'm going to protect my own, and that seems different from the Wiccan.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the young witches, the younger witches of today. I love them. I love how many filters and restrictions, emotional and mental restrictions, that they do not have. I watch my daughter, who I did not bring her up in any formal religious structure. I brought her up with a deep spirituality of cause and effect. And who do you want to be in this world? And so I watch her out in the world, and she really understands that the energy and the results of manipulating energy, and what energy do you give off in any moment. And I'm super, super proud of her. And these other young witches who are coming out going, I'm going to own my power. And it's our generation. We had to earn mentally and emotionally, spiritually. We felt we had to earn the right to own our own power. And we didn't want the next generation to have to go through what we went through on this mental process of, do I deserve my own power? And now we have this generation of young witches that are going, I'm inherently powerful, and I'm going to do my due. And I love them.
It's true. They are more comfortable initially with it, and it doesn't matter sort of their race or their age. I mean, I would include young, even people under 40 or younger, and they don't have the same struggle that certainly we had. And some of it, I do think, has to do with people, however, like Budapest and Laurie Cabot, who fought the legal battles. Yeah. And the legal battles really, really are so important. And I've seen younger women that know that, and they'll say, we owe this, we can do fortune telling in California because of Z Budapest. She fought it. And it opened up some of that part that I think is essential for any group that's is feeling oppressed or as a minority. Is the legal battles are hugely important.
Oh, I love having that conversation with folks. There's some really sensitive, really, really sensitive subjects coming out right now. A lot of it's based on appropriations. A lot of it's based on equality. We're in the anti-racist movement now. And so to have these conversations with my daughter and my niece, who is more millennial, and my daughter is Generation Z, about, hang on, you got to understand what our resources were. For instance, not a popular opinion of late, but when 30 plus years ago, when I was yearning for legitimate spiritual practice, not something that's continuing, that's living and alive, that I get to be a part of, that I get to experience. And one of the first living spiritual practices was the exercise of smudging. And I hate to say this, but 35 years ago, I learned about that. And it was one of the first things that was just this great living practice. So I absolutely glommed onto it. This is a practice for me. And I learned from it, and I developed my own, what felt really energetic to me, in my own practice within it. So then of the past few years, saying we should stop calling it smudging and just call it cleansing with smoke or different terms. I forgot the word right now. And I said, so understand, for someone like me who's been using the term smudge and using the techniques of smudging and honoring where it came from to the best of our ability, this was us honoring what was being done 35 years ago when I learned about this. We were honoring this process, very excited to be part of a tradition or something. and then learning how to bring it into our own tradition. So this was no one, my parents, my siblings, no one in my community ever gave a thought to a First Nations person.
Mm-hmm.
They never gave a thought to the fact that there's a white guy in paint in the movie being an Indian. So that was not a thing. So what we did is we said, hey, that's not cool. Let's give some more respect to these people. So it's been these baby steps, like Z Budapest, doing all that legal work and changing the fortune telling laws, and then people of my generation and our generation saying, no, it's not okay to just put people in paint and call them Asian or Chinese or whatever. Let's make sure that in media we are not being hypocrites here. So baby steps, right? And magic was the same thing. As I was so excited to learn about these different things in magic and different traditions in magic, and experiment and bring them into my own toolbox. So then it becomes harder for us of our generation to go, oh, I can see why you feel that way and how you feel that is appropriating.
Well, I think that one of my issues about people in general is I don't know that people use their words consciously enough to begin with. And as a reader, as a tarot card reader for over 20 years, I've learned to not to, kind of, judge my words, but I watch my words and I try to pick ones that I'm really trying to emphasize in the reading. Like it seems like every reading has its own specific words. And one of the things I wish we could all have are schools of communication, because I do think because of the instantaneousness of communication that there are things that are just really innocent, and but they're so quick, and that people, yes, there are certain conversations that you can see really are really not good. And then there's a slip somebody will make on a Facebook page or Instagram, and then someone jumps all over them. And I don't think it's a good way to spend our energy. I don't mind it so much as, that is this efficient? Is this, and also living with a Canadian, my husband uses words differently. And I don't know that we have an awareness about words to begin with, let alone the loaded words,
Yeah, this is, and right now I agree with you that communication and what words mean. I have a diverse staff here at Coventry, and they've grown up in different generations, different parts of town, different cultures, ethnicities. And so when I say, I'll say, a perfect example is my sister would say, well, this is a bump in the road we got to get through. And I looked at her and I go, this isn't a bump in the road. It's a goddamn canyon. What does a bump in the road mean to you? She goes, well, a bump in the road means very similar to what I was saying, but she kept saying this bump in the road. And I'm like, no. So when we get down to what things mean, so we try to be very mindful. If I just say, put on your big girl panties, let's move on. To this person, that means something very different. And so we're learning that. And I'm finding right now, communication is evolving. Oh, look at us right now. We're having to communicate much more deliberately. I was talking to my staff saying because our customer service manager cannot work in the building. She has kids at home, and we are adjusting. And I'm just getting different phone systems and the whole thing so we can work remotely if needed. And I said, so what we're missing that informal, casual conversation moment that informs so much. So, and I'm watching this in the society, and I'm watching this in classes, et cetera. So we can't go into the store and say, I need a spell for blah, blah, blah. Or, and this is, which candle do I need for this? Or what crystal is good for this? We don't have that casual conversation. It's actually an effort. I need to get online and find the person to talk to, and I need to type something to them for the love of God. And and then I need to type something back. I get a lot of questions and emails right now, and I look at this email and I'm like, short answer or long answer? I'm typing, it's going to be the short answer. So so I have to be much more deliberate. I'm finding communication is evolving in a big way.
Well, I think that's a good thing, and it's definitely a necessary thing, because it's something I've observed over many, many years. It's not a new thing, and it's just something that I wish we had ways to learn and relearn how to communicate better with one another. And one of the things that's missing, and it's a lot of the platforms are not really equipped for it, is listening. There's not enough forums for listening, if you think about it, and it's a skill you really have to keep working at. But getting back to the archetype of the witch, now the archetype of the witch is often depicted in different ways. We kind of mentioned it earlier. There's, the older green-faced witch, and then there's also really, I think one of the archetypes is the young and sexy witch. It's a very, very popular one on magazine covers, and so do you have any opinions about how you see the witches depicted through art and culture and movies? Do you like some more than the other?
In my head, I'm the really sexy, cute witch on the broom, flying with the moon behind me. I feel that that's actually me. Even though I might not look like it in my head, that's me. But so I think the series Charmed changed the game for the archetypical witch, so how witches are seen. And I love them for that. As cheeseball as that series was, I loved that they did that for witches, that we could be somewhat normal. Also superpowers. I think I have superpowers too.
I love that series. I actually rewatched it, and it is sometimes a little campy, but I loved it. It's just one of those things. It worked.
It totally did. It totally did. There's always hope. There's always struggle, and so I will forever love that, and I'll forever love Buffy, and Willow being the witch that she is,
Mm-hmm.
and so witches in media. I feel in this century have gotten the right kind of teeth. So before, witches were there's always something like nefarious to them. There's always something like, even Bell Book and Candle, she still had a nefarious type of she wanted a man, and she was going to manipulate this man. Or they're like Bedknobs and Broomsticks, where they're a little or Mary Poppins. There's a little bit of the like the sweet and really get not enough teeth.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like witch as activist, witch as someone who is righting the wrongs, is a newer concept. And now we're kind of the pendulum swinging, and witch as a badass and not always doing good.
Right.
So we get to have a plethora of them. The new Sabrina series has been very interesting, and I'm finding it fascinating that they swayed her to the dark side a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And the magicians, that's a little more.
Yeah, I watched the first season of that, I think. My only issue, I rewatched Charm, and I liked Bewitched, but there seems to be this reoccurring theme of women that are witches that don't want to be witches anymore, that it's a burden. And I said, why do they have to do that? That's my only, it's like it's still a little bit like, it's cooler to be a witch, but on the other hand, you have to suffer in this way if you are a witch. And I just want at least some balance in that.
Yes. I loved how in Charmed, the fourth sister, Rose?
Yes, Rose.
Rose. She wanted to be a witch. She's excited about this. So there was that evolution. And I like in Sabrina, she's enjoying the new series. She's enjoying being a witch. You're right. I don't like the denial. That's why Endora in Bewitched was always my favorite.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, she
And I
totally
did like,
embraced it.
what was her Samantha's sister's name
Oh,
from Bewitched? Was it Sabrina? No,
I don't know. I can't
Serena.
remember. Serena?
I loved her too, because I'm like, and it really bothered me that Samantha always tamped her power down for a man,
Yes.
but then that was the 60s, right? And that was
Right.
her job.
Right.
But then there's a few new series coming out that sound promising and interesting that I have not watched. But yeah, but here's the thing about media is they're going to go with what sells. And
Yes.
they're just going to do what they're going to do and make it campy or shocking or get people involved in whatever to be how they want to be. It's interesting, the term black magic. That is something that really came from Hollywood, more from Hollywood
Mm-hmm.
than it did from anything else. And prior to that, the term black magic was a very racist term.
Oh, really?
It was a battle. It's a little more, and I don't have solid research on this, but just some research on it, is that it was really the black magician, so to speak, or the black conjure people, that's like, well, they must be doing bad. So it was really very much, black magic is very much a term to describe people of color who are doing witchery or magic or conjure or anything like that. So to bring them down, to belittle them. And it's a very racist term. It's not really about good and bad. It's not evil.
That's interesting. It makes sense, actually. I hadn't really thought about it, but I have noticed the color black, even in animals, has been demonized. So black cats, black birds. There was a period where they were killing all the black cats, which of course spread the plague as a result. And so the color itself is also interesting to look at. And even the way New Agers describe light and dark. And I really don't like this idea, like, I'm a light worker. No, I'm hopefully going to be an integrated worker. The darkness has so many good, beautiful qualities in it. Darkness is not bad.
I like to remind the light workers that we don't actually grow in the light, we grow in the dark. Plants grow at night when they absorb what they need to absorb in the light. But until we get back into the shadows, until we get back into the dark, we cannot integrate it.
Yeah, it seems like this whole complex thing around darkness that's also it seems to me part of racism myself, like magically, and it needs to change, and it's changing in physics because of dark matter, and they're seeing that all this dark energy is really important for creation. That is a fascinating way to look at. We need both, and neither is. It's more like I guess the Taoists have it kind of right, the yin and the yang. But unfortunately, I still don't think in the language of certainly certain people spiritually, it's really understood that just and also the idea that the shadow, like what's buried in the shadow, it isn't always bad things that are buried. There is something called the golden shadow, where you repress your talents. Let's say you grow up in a family that doesn't want you to dance, and it's a religious family that doesn't believe in dancing or something, and you repress it. And evidently that it's a specific term. I forget what Jungian person I read, and it's a little harder to tap into and to find, is your golden shadow. And the idea that shadow work is always about getting icky things out. I said, that's not true.
No.
Not at all.
No, we hide in the shadows. We hide some of our best things in the shadows so they're not judged or taken away from us or belittled. And it's interesting, when I started making the Blessed Herbal Candles a million years ago, and the protection candle, and I meditated on each one. When I make a product, I meditate on it. I make friends with it, and I see what wants to be born within it. And the protection candle wanted to be black. So everything I read said protection was white, protection's white, protection's white, protection's white, the light of God, the light of the divine, etc. And I said, nope, it's black, because sometimes you need to hide in the shadows. and you need to bring in all. So black being you bring in all colors,
Mm-hmm.
A very, very deep. Sometimes you just need to root it, earth it, and it just wanted to be black. And so I did, and this was 30 years ago that I made the protection candles black. And the amount of grief I got, I had people who would not carry my product line because I didn't have a white candle. I'll tell you why I didn't
What?
have a white candle.
I can't believe that.
I had people who would not, the Blessed Herbal Candles. Now, I'm going to toot my own horn here. No one was making, blessing, putting out there on the market, a complete product. I mean, back in the day, you'd take your 7-day candle and you take your poker and you poke some holes in it and you put your stuff in there, and there's your dress candle. Or you would take whatever pillar candle that you got from the green one or whatever, and then you would roll the herbs and the oils on it, and that's your dress candle. Well, I wanted it on the inside, so I started pouring my own candles and making them. And so I started the whole intentional candle on the national market. I started that, and there's been a few companies that have come behind me because it's a really good idea. So rock on, do your do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had people in the beginning who thought they asked me if this was black magic. If they said, because I had at the end of almost every blessing is 3 times 3 times 3, which is, a good Wiccan closing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of education to do in a lot of little stores. But because I didn't have a white candle and my protection candle was black, people felt that I was doing evil.
Wow.
So I did lose some customers back in the day, and that's okay. I'm not for everybody. I never thought I needed to be. I did not have a white candle at that time, because if you make candles with colors and you only have one pot, you're never going to have a white candle.
It's practical.
Yeah. So I was just reading a book that came out in the past 2 years, and in her color chart, she put black for protection.
Ah.
And I was like, well, check that out. I did make a paradigm shift in all this.
That's amazing. I never even thought of something like, I've bought that candle. And your candles, I think I've been buying them for 15 years. I love them. I mean, they're still very popular, and people use them and love them, and they feel like they work. So I congratulate you on being consistent and really having a product that lasts through time, which I don't think is probably easy. So
nope. I wanted to give up a couple of times, but nope.
What was the challenge that you faced that made you rethink doing it?
Well, you know what? I put up a meme when COVID-19 first came out, and we went to lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, listen, Coventry has been through 2 recessions, 3 if you count the one I started it in. We've been through almost going bankrupt a couple of times. We've been through 9/11. We've been through the housing bust. I've been embezzled for over $100,000. COVID-19, hold my bourbon. I got this. So throughout the years, I mean, I started my business when I was 24 years old, and I thought I could do no wrong because I was doing so much right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing this. I have this new idea out on the market, and people are loving it. People were waiting for it. And I did the right thing at the right time. So part of it was luck,
Mm-hmm.
but part of it was a really hard work getting out there and explaining to people that it's okay. Well, I did this to make money to go to college, and then I never went to college. I did this instead. So I really went the long road, the one that goes like this.
Mm.
People think it's a straight line, but no, you double back on a lot of things. I guess the worst time was my first really big failure. We were over $300,000 in debt. This was 20 years ago. I didn't have any wax to make any candles. I didn't know how I was going to pay anybody. I hadn't taken a paycheck in a year, and I was out of all of my resources. And I sat there with my sister, Patty, who's my business partner. And, I just kind of did the proverbial shake my fist at God, going, I give up. If you want this to happen, you got to make it work for me. And then we both started laughing because we realized how true that was. We had to get out of the way. And so we went back to work the next day. So we said, well, if we're going to, because I said, I don't want to not work with you. I don't know what my life would be like without working with you. So I think I would just do something else so we could work together. And so we both decided to go back to work the next day and reinvent our company and start it as if we were starting it from scratch. And that's what this right now, with COVID-19 and the shutdowns, that's what this right now absolutely feels like. It feels like I'm reinventing myself and reinventing my business. I
think that's actually probably necessary because of the impact of all these events. We don't even know how it's going to ripple out. And some people are already saying that because of not having to spend money on rent, they're not going back to their commercial buildings. They don't need to. I've heard this from some lawyers. And so it's going to restructure things in ways I think ultimately will be very positive for the most part. Because the system, many people have been talking about certain structures need to at least change. I don't think everything necessarily has to completely collapse, but there are some structures that do, and there's some that need to be modified. And there's a lot of, in the natural cycle of life, destruction and creation are hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And so we know that. And some of us, of course, are having to recreate, and we're scurrying to do it, and other people are doing it. I know someone that just is at home more and has enough unemployment. And so they're really just doing some of the things they've been wanting to do again in a kind of relaxed way. So everyone's story is a little different.
I know at least a dozen people who are changing their careers.
Yeah, it's a good time to do it.
I know at least a dozen people who are changing their spouses.
That too. That was something.
Or maybe not changing their spouses, changing their marital status.
Yeah, changing their, exactly.
So yeah, it's been it's been a time of, I don't want to say awakening, maybe rude awakening, but a time of intense self-assessment. Sometimes you already know it, but now you just have to deal with it.
Right.
A couple of things here at Coventry. I knew my customer base was shifting to being a lot more mail order, but I was just assessing this today. I would say 20% of our products got shipped a second time once it got to its destination. So we sold to a lot of people who had online stores, who have online stores. I just did a reassessment. We now are over 40% of our customers ship our products out again. And so we're talking and we're like, this is a big deal. So we need to make it easier for our products to get shipped again. And so that is like, I kind of knew it, but now this is going to be a really big thing and a really big investment and a change in our process and a change in how things look and how they look on the store shelves. And it's a big cascade. So, I mean, that simple thing that seems so little, but if we have a product that's hard for my retailers to ship, they're not going to promote me.
Sure. Now, I want to get back to one more question before we're getting closer to the end. And I just wanted to know your thoughts about where you personally see the movement of witchcraft and the archetype of witchcraft going, because as you know, that archetype can rise and fall. And is this something that's going to become more integrated? Is it, there is a cool factor to it now? Is that going to play a positive or negative, I guess, repercussions on it?
I feel we're normalizing it here in the U.S. and in more of the first world countries. I hate to say that in that way, but so like I look at one of my big, hairy, audacious goals in life is to normalize the word witch and magic, as if you were saying yoga and meditation. Yoga is such a normalized word at this time that I'm at before COVID, I'm at the salad bar with my niece and she goes, hang on, I got to do my salad bar yoga, as she goes under the sneeze guard to get the green peppers. But look at how normalized this word is.
That's true.
And how normalized meditation is. I was just on a business call right before this with a bunch of movers and shakers in the Detroit area we're all working on our plan to get through this whole thing. These are not spiritual businesses. These are, some of them are military suppliers. Some of them are big car company suppliers. Some of them are training. This is not metaphysics in here. But the guy who's in the military supplying, he goes, you know what? I got to get back to my morning meditations. I haven't done it for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, check you out. Guy said, I got to really watch what kind of energy I'm manifesting. And so I reached out to him later. I said, well, I loved what you had to say about that. And he starts like mansplaining meditation to me, which was adorable. But he's not a spiritual metaphysical person. He's not even, this is just something that he glommed onto because it helps clear his mind. And so that's where I think witch and magic is going to a place where it's normalized. And I know that hurts some people's feelings that it's not going to be as special. I love it because it's going to open doors.
Sure.
For us as magical people, where we can be a little more out and we can have non-threatening conversations with more people about our process. So when I bring a new person into Coventry, I can say, well, we're very energetically driven here. So we're very careful on the words we say and what we bring and the music we play in here. And I don't get you're a weirdo look.
Right.
So now these young ladies that I bring in, the young ladies and young men, when I say we watch our energy in this company, they go, oh, hey, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a healthy atmosphere.
Quit. 15 years ago, I had a woman quit because she couldn't take the fact that we're always talking about magic and energy and manifesting here. She goes, I can't be here. I'm a Christian. I can't do this. And I'm like, I know you can't, baby. It's okay.
Right.
No harm, no foul. Pray for me.
So before we get to the end, how can people reach you? Is it best on Facebook? I know you have Instagram. It's at Coventry Candles.
Coventry Creations on Facebook, Coventry Candles on Instagram. CoventryCreations.com is my website. That's some of the best ways to get me. We do a lot of Instagram and Facebooking.
Yes, Instagram. I noticed that on your Instagram page.
I have a Hannah, and Hannah does an amazing job.
Well, that's great. Now, the other thing I did want to kind of bring up, I know we're really close to the end, but the idea of men in witchcraft has certainly grown more since I first was involved in the 90s, and it seemed like it was more women, other than, some of the men that, like Scott Cunningham, that published. And do you feel like that's becoming sort of easier for men to embrace the word witch and to call themselves a witch, and for women to accept that too?
I love it. I love that more and more men are coming to the low magic, shall we say, more of the earthy magic, which is usually just a role for women. Usually it's like men are the magicians and they do the ceremonial magic, and then women are the witches and we stir the cauldron.
Right.
And I'm liking that we have a little more of a blend. And one of the reasons why I'm really enjoying this is, in the past, an unpopular statement I'm going to say is, there was a higher percentage of straight men that got involved in witchcraft were predators. And I have heard this, I've experienced this, I've heard this from other people, because they were such a minority and we were kind of easy pickings at that point. Like, look, a man, I'm so excited. Now, since men are more prevalent and male witches or men in witchcraft are more prevalent, it is, there's less predators, which I love. But I also love that that masculine energy is coming into this, and that men get the opportunity to experience the feminine side of themselves, and how much power there is in that.
Sure.
They really had locked that down for themselves. And if they want to call themselves warlocks or magicians, I don't care. You be you, I be me, and we're gonna love each other, hopefully.
That's
and respect
great.
each other.
I love leaving on that. And thank you so much for talking to us today. We look forward to having you on again in the future, hopefully, and really enjoyed it.
What a pleasure this was. I love this. We're face to face on the screen, not that anyone else can see it. They probably see us side to side. And I really feel like I'm talking to a good friend that I've had for decades.
Aw.
And what a beautiful, pleasant time this has been with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I think it went really well, and I think a lot of people will enjoy it. So thank you all. Thank you again, Jacki. Thank you for listening in. I hope you all have a interesting rest of your week, and I look forward to seeing you next week as we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together.